Hi everyone, back to the black wall. I put up a poll on Attack of the Killer Keyboard, and if you could, I'll put it again in this one, just tell me which one you want, the white wall, the black wall, blackish wall, because I'm not quite sure which one is which one looks better, but we're back here. Since this is October, and it's the month of remembrance of our loved ones that have passed on, I was thinking about my grandmother, and it took me 45 minutes to find out what day. Actually, I still don't even know what day she died, but I didn't even know what year it was. I had to dig out the papers, and what I mean is dig out the papers. I don't have a death certificate. If there was one, I'm sure there was one. If there was a death certificate, my mother most likely had it, and I did not get it from her. My mother had dementia the last 13 years of her life, and she threw out pictures, everything. And before I found out she had done these things, it was already too late. I'd lost a lot. Not that we had much. We'd had a fire when I was almost 8 years old, so that pretty much destroyed a lot right there. But what little we had since then was lost. So I don't have a death certificate. I don't have a birth certificate. I don't have anything. I don't know what happened to all her stuff. Like I said, it probably went to my mom. The only reason why I knew my mother was throwing everything out was I was her caretaker at the time, and I caught her in the basement one day. I thought she was going down there to fiddle with laundry or go through things, and I found her tearing up photos. And I convinced her to stop, and I got a hold of everything that was there, what little there was. And so I lost the only picture I had of her in her youth. I lost the only picture I had of my grandmother in her youth. I have one picture, I think it's her as an infant, but that's about it. And I have a couple of bad quality pictures, which you're going to see. I'm going to put them up here, there, and everywhere through this video. I have to just tweak them, make them pretty. So, my grandmother. Best understanding we have from the information is she was born in 1907, November 13th. I had another date in my head even. She was born in Brooklyn, Red Hook, Brooklyn, to an immigrant family. My great-grandmother being German and my great-grandfather being English. There's a story that goes with all this. Supposedly he came from a family of some money. They owned a paper in Liverpool. He met my grandmother. He fell for her. He married her. His family objected. They came to America. This was not to have the American dream. In fact, he actually committed suicide because he couldn't find work and left her with 18 children. Only 9 of which reached majority, and that must have been, I can't imagine what kind of terrible things happened to this poor woman at that time period, the turn of a century, and being a single woman with a brood of children. I do have some idea, though, a little bit. You see, my grandmother never talked about the past. Never, ever discussed the past. And I never thought about it till much later when I decided to actually have a sit down and talk with her. I had enough nerve. You know what I'm saying? My grandmother was a stereotype. Hot-headed redhead. And she had, in general, I respected her. I thought she was a hero because she had done things that, in my mind, a woman in her time period never did. But she scared me. And I thought that she would, if I spoke to her the wrong way, would bitch slap me right immediately. Because she had done it when I was a child because she thought I was lying. Her hand had come out so fast one time, gave me a fat lip that lasted for 4 days, because she thought I was lying. It wasn't that I was lying, I had forgotten. I had gone into, for a brief time after the fire, we were living in the rooming house that she lived in, because she lived in a one single room in a rooming house. I got up, it was summertime, I had gone into our bedroom, I turned off the fan, I looked out the window, you know, walked back into the kitchen, and she's like, "What did you do?" And I said, "Nothing." And she's like, "No, you went in there and you did something, what did you do?" "Nothing." Her hand, boom, it was out so fast, I didn't even see it. All I knew was like, I had never been hit by my grandmother that I remembered, so it was a shock. I never remembered any hittings as a child by my parents. I'm sure maybe there might have been, but I don't remember any of them. So it was a shock, and she's like, "Never lie to me." "I'm not lying, I'm not lying." It took me 4 days to figure out what I did. And I went up to her and said, "Grandma, what I actually did was I went in there and turned off the fan, because we use, you know, you don't use the don't waste electricity." And she's like, "Yeah, but that's kind of like a lie." And I was like, "Okay." So that was at 8. So no, you didn't lie to her. You didn't, like I said, she scared me. I respected her, but she scared me, but I admired her. She was kind of my hero in a weird way, because she had such fight and spunk. She just was such a strong person. She had been a truck driver in the 1920s. A woman being a truck driver. She dressed, the one picture I have, which I don't have anymore, shows her wearing, it had to be the 20s, maybe the 30s. She had short hair like a boy, and pants and a shirt. And I thought, she's not dressed like a woman, she's dressed like a man, and that kind of stuck in the back of my head for future. She had had 3 husbands, from what I'd heard. My mother came from the first one. Now, I don't know if these were official marriages or anything. I just know there was 3 husbands. The first one was a gambler, and she got pregnant when she was about 16 years old. And as soon as the baby came, he was, "I'm out of here." So now she was a single mom. And she was trying to work on one side of the street and run across the street and watch an infant. And she was going back and forth all day long. And my great-grandmother basically said, "You can't live like this, I'll take care of the baby." So my grandmother gave over her only child to my great-grandmother. And my great-grandmother raised her until she was 8. Now, when I do my mother's story, eventually I will, you'll find out the other end of that bit. But she only had the one child. She worked her entire life as much as she could. She did a lot of different things, I'm sure. The only thing she ever did mention was one of her first jobs was an usherette at a movie theater, and at that time she made $2 a week. And she said that was a lot of money back then. There seems to be a little confusion regarding the paperwork thing about what her last name was, because it looks like on my mother's birth certificate, her last name was Leisen, and somewhere over the time it changed to Leison. In fact, I had to go to the Social Security database and try to find out when she died. Excuse me, not when she died, when she was born, because I couldn't remember other than it was 1907. And she's not under the SEN, she's under the SON. So just a mere slip of saying it incorrectly with a New York accent, we changed the spelling. And thus it changed all her paperwork. She never complained. She never spoke of the past, and she never complained of any pain. And she had rheumatoid arthritis. I didn't know what it was at the time, and I knew she had a curved back, and I didn't know what that was till years later, and she had fallen and broken her elbow. I never bothered to tell anybody. Didn't go to the doctor. And it wasn't until she was talking to my cousin, the one I've mentioned, and she was complaining about it hurting. This was about 4 or 5 months after the break. Again, we didn't know it was broken. He took her to the doctor because she was saying it felt like something was sticking out. And the doctor said that it was a piece of bone was working its way out. And when they took the x-ray, they saw that she had broken her elbow, but she had never had it fixed. And so there were just little tiny pieces of bone working their way out through the skin because they just hadn't bothered, you know, they were just floating around in there. But here's the thing, she never complained it hurt. She just said, there's something kind of poking out of here and feels weird. And that's when they gave her a really full physical. My cousin, being a nurse, made sure of this, and they said her spine from the rheumatoid arthritis was like a sponge, and that's why she had the curled over, hunched back. Again, never complained of a sore back. Never complained. When I finally got up enough nerve in my 20s to ask her a little bit about the past, and that was me getting up nerve, trust me, because I was curious about the picture that I'd only recently seen with her dressed as a man. And I know she had at some point before that dressed, at least I think she dressed in a dress, because she talked about being a flapper in the 1920s and about she had a, not a mobster, a real low level mobster, not mobster, that's a bad one. He was a numbers runner for the mob. And he had bought her this hat that she loved, and they were in a speakeasy, and it got raided, and she was in the bathroom, and she was like, ah, and she like started climbing through the window to get out of the speakeasy, and as she climbed through the window, her hat fell back into the bathroom. And when she got down outside, her boyfriend was like, we gotta go. And she's like, my hat, goddammit, my brand new hat's in there. That was the whole reason why they'd gone out, so she could show off her hat. She had been in a shootout. This is when she moved from Brooklyn to Long Island. The local bank was being robbed, and she had been across the street, and they had run in there with guns, and shooting started. She said I think machine guns or something. And she just hit the ground. She's like, whenever you hear gunshots, she's like, just hit the ground, because that's the only way you're going to make it out alive. This is advice I got as a child. Some things to remember. As I said, she didn't raise my mother. My mother was raised by other people up until they were 16, and that's when they finally lived together. And so all the stories, what little stories I have of my grandmother came from my mother. Like the story about, I guess this had to be husband number 2? Yes, because she really actually liked husband number 3. And he passed away of a heart attack. He was a big, heavy man. And he was the only one that treated her right, from what my mother said. He treated her kindly and seemed to love her. And he died when I was 2, so I don't even remember him, other than I see a picture of him when I was like infant. There's a picture. Apparently with husband number 2, who was an alcoholic, and my great-grandmother was an alcoholic up until she was 30. She stopped smoking, she stopped drinking, she stopped everything when she was 30 years old. She had rotted out most of her teeth from her drinking, her alcoholism, and she had them all pulled out when she was 30. And they never gave her, she never got dentures, because she thought, what's the point? That's a lot of money, that's a waste of money. So she could eat anything though, even without teeth. She wouldn't, it was like, she reminded me of a turtle, which I adored, how they can eat anything. And she ate anything. It might have taken her a little longer, but she ate steak, she ate apples, she could bite an apple. When my mother was living with her, obviously, I don't know if she was still an alcoholic, but the husband she was with was an alcoholic, and I'm sure he treated her terribly, that she got to the point that she was going to be rid of him. He fell asleep, I guess in a drunken stupor, upstairs in the bedroom, and my grandmother set the bed on fire, and then came downstairs and was just calmly drinking coffee and sitting at the kitchen table. And my mother, who was about in her teens, I guess, 16, 17, I'm not quite sure, but obviously after 16, because that's when they moved in together. She's like, I smell smoke. My grandmother's like, I don't smell no smoke. No, I smell smoke. Mom, I smell smoke. And she's, no, I don't smell anything. You're imagining things. No, I distinctly smell smoke. And my mother started running around the house trying to figure out where the smoke was, and she followed it upstairs and saw the bed was on fire. He was still asleep in it, passed out. And she's like, she came running downstairs. She's like, Dad's bed's on fire. Oh my God! And she's like, you don't. She's like, no, it's not. And she's like, yes, it is. It's on. I'll go put it. No, you don't want to do that. You don't want to put it out. And my mother's like, what? What are you? So she runs upstairs and she puts the fire out. And she's like, apparently he didn't wake up. He must have been in a really good one. He didn't wake up. And she came downstairs. She's like, oh my God. She's like, oh my God. She's like, I put it out. I put the fire out. And my grandmother was just sitting at the table, probably playing solitaire, because she did that all the time. And she was like, didn't I tell you there wasn't any fire? But there was a fire. I put it out. Who told you to put it out? Did I tell you to put it out? But he could have died. That was the point. Now he didn't. And she just went back to playing the cards. The few times people hear that story, they think they don't understand, but they would never understand how rough her life was. Living in Red Hook, Brooklyn, which was the projects at the time, the ghetto. She was in a ghetto. People go, oh, black people ghetto. No, they had white people ghetto back then too. They still do. And at that time period, what else could she have done to get away from her husband? Women were chattel to their husbands at that time. And men could do whatever they want, pretty much like they can do now somewhat, only the laws are slightly different. And that's the end of part 1. We'll be continuing the rest of the story in part 2. I want to thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.